Two more panels, and we're ending with some tremendous panels. So the first of which is, we've now looked at this as from a founder's lens. We've looked at it from the corporate lens, and now we're going to look at it from the venture capital lens.
Okay. All right, so we'll try to make this interesting. Why don't we start off with some introductions? Why don't we just introduce ourselves here and tell us a little bit about what you're up to?
My name is Caroline Lewis. I'm the managing partner of Rogue Women. We are on Fund 2. We invest in women-led startups, B2B SaaS, and enterprise across the U.S. I'm really excited to be here today with these fine individuals. Sydney?
Hi, everyone. My name is Paige Thomas. I'm the founder and general partner of Symphonic Capital. We're an early-stage investment fund that invests in companies that are closing access gaps around health and wealth, and really excited to be here, too.
How's it going, everybody? My name is McKeever Edward Conwell II. Most people know me as Mac. If you follow me on Twitter, it's Mac the VC. I am the founder and managing partner of RareBreed Ventures, a pre-seed to seed venture fund based in Baltimore, Maryland, investing in companies outside the major tech hubs, so mainly outside of New York, Silicon Valley, and Massachusetts. I am honored to be on this stage with these amazing women. One is a Kaufman classmate of mine, another one is a fellow Kaufman fellow. And, you know, we gave some short introductions, but let me go a little further. Caroline says she's on Fund 2. Many women, GPs, don't get the Fund 2, and she has a platform behind her and supporting her. That is amazing in itself.
Oh, thanks, Matt.
My good friend Sydney is literally a trailblazer in this industry. She started a blog and blogged her journey breaking into venture and helped start what is now known as one of the marquee pre-seed firms on the planet. It's actually the firm that coined the term pre-seed. So while these two women are very humble, they are titans of industry and they're very amazing, and I am lucky to share the stage with them.
You're the ultimate hype man. So why don't we focus on that? What have you done that makes it so special? This is a question to each of you, that draws the LPs to you, and then also, what is it about your secret sauce that makes founders want to work with you, and what's brought this kind of success on both sides?
Mac, you can start us off.
Okay, so for me, it's pretty simple. People follow me on Twitter tend to like what I say. The majority of my Fund 1 was raised off of Twitter, so if you ask my LPs, they will tell you they liked what I was tweeting, and when they met me, they're like, oh, you're just like your Twitter. This is cool. That helps. Secret sauce and why founders want to work with me, same thing. They tend to think I'm cool on Twitter. And they're like, oh, Mac's really cool on Twitter. He's very much himself and honest. And when I meet them, they're like, you're exactly the guy you are on Twitter. Thank you. I'm like, well, this is who I am. But I would say, to break it down, people like the fact that I'm just authentic. I'm myself. I'm not trying to play this game to appease anybody. I'm not trying to play this game to make LPs think I'm going to fit in a box. I'm doing this because I want to invest in amazing founders, like Sierra right here, this amazing black woman in front of me. She created a company making synthetic braiding hair out of plant fibers, the first woman in the US to do that. I was her first investor because many other investors were like, what is this plant-based hair? This doesn't make sense. I'm like, oh yeah, this makes plenty of sense. I'll do this. And I do it, and I started my own firm so that I could have the ability and the autonomy to do that. Right? I wasn't going to have anybody tell me I couldn't make an investment because it didn't make sense to them. Like, okay, it doesn't make sense to you. It doesn't have to. As long as I think it makes money, that's all that matters, right? So that's what works for me.
So, thank you, Mac. That was very kind. I have been in the venture ecosystem for close to a decade now. And so very much, for all intensive purposes, outside of my race and gender, I am the most vanilla fund manager you could find. And so I have helped build a fund. I have helped invest in hundreds of companies, helped raise hundreds of millions of dollars. And so I've kind of done this already. And so this is very much my second rodeo. So really excited to be doing it with my values and my way, and investing in the companies that I want to work with. But all things else considered, a bit of a veteran. And so it's been a lot of fun to do it with a bit of wisdom this time around.
I would say, when I came into, I did not mean and intend to come into venture. And thanks to Tom Sperry and Adam Stoll back there, especially Tom taking a gamble on me. I was actually telling a story yesterday of how I was asking him to help me understand how to do early stage investing, and he invited me to this like demo day of stuff, and he said, well, let's debrief, and I prepared like reports ready to debrief with him. And he was like, well, what'd you think? And I was like, I thought it was cool. And then later, like a month later, he was like, I offered you a job and you weren't interested. I was like, you offered me a job? Anyway, I came into the venture ecosystem, and we all mentioned Kauffman as this fellowship for VCs, and I went to my first Kauffman module, and I was with, the head of investments for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the head of investments for Bahrain, big name folks. And I was not like Sydney, where I was not this veteran person in VC. And I remember feeling really intimidated, like I don't belong here. And I had actually come from a pretty senior position from the corporate world, and it was definitely a humbling experience to go from that to kind of starting a new career. As I made my way over the past 6 years now in the venture ecosystem through kind of like, oh, you have to get on this deal, it's a 25 million post money, you got to commit now. And I'm like, I don't know, it feels a little rushed. I'm like, not much there, but feeling like I was out of touch by not doing it, to now we're in a different cycle where people have different values, which are kind of more aligned to how we were investing before. I kept thinking, man, I get the VC industry that we're in. Like, I get the game that we're in. And when you talk to LPs, still to this day, institutional LPs will be like, well, do you have the top tier funds following into your companies? What are your logos? They're essentially logo hunting. And I actually, the other day I had to tell one LP, I was like, if that is your goal, I'm ultimately trying to optimize for DPI. DPI, for those of you who don't understand, it's the return of capital. And if you're logo hunting, that's great. I'm never going to be the VC that you want to back. And I got to this point over the past 5 years where thanks to my partners and my mentor, and also kind of the self-exploration, which Charlotte mentioned, like know who you are and how that shows up, I was like, okay, how do I play this game, but how do I do it more in my own way that's aligned to my values? How that actually has shown up to be different, which attracts founders and then subsequently some LPs who are aligned to it, is out of our management fee. Again, this doesn't seem very novel to me, but it's very novel in the VC world. Out of our management fee, we pay for an executive coach, personal financial coaching, family stipend. We actually secured a deal with KinderCare to offer childcare to our founders. Not that novel, right? But why we thought about doing that was because it was my own lived experience. Like, I've been a founder, I've been a leader, and I'm a woman in this country, and I have kids, and it's fucking hard. And I was like, I want to help my founders. Like, I'm never gonna be the platform that connects them with the best salesperson, the best engineer, the best logo. But I know what it's like to build and do stuff and have all the other things. So what can I do to help them? In addition, we share a portion of our GP carry, because it was like, how do we really elevate everybody that we invest in? The only way that I got to some of that, though, was truly understanding, like, what are my values and because everybody says, like, what's different about you in the VC industry? And the reality is so many firms aren't different. Like, they're the kind of, they're going after the same deals. Look, Sequoia's in my deal, Andreessen's in my deal. And so I think, like, really optimizing for how do I support founders was very much in touch with my values, my principles, and then really hyper-focusing on portfolio construction, which I also personally surprisingly think that many VC firms don't actually think about portfolio construction and how they're going to return capital. And that's also thanks to my partners who really push that. So I think those are two things that I'm leaning into that I think attract founders. It's surprising me that I still have to, like, LPs are like, I just don't really see, like, how that makes you different. I'm like, that's cool. You're probably not my LP, but you might be my LP if you think it's different. So, yeah.
So speaking of attracting founders, we're in company here. There's a whole bunch of them in that room. I think we're surrounded, and they're all here. And I'm sure once this thing ends, there's going to bum rush you, right? So you get a lot of these requests, you get a lot of these emails, you're not going to invest in all of them. So what is the thing that you see that makes you want to invest in them? What's the what makes them fundable? What should they be prepared to do? And let me tee it up to Sydney first.
Oh, this is a really good question. I was just talking to one of my LPs earlier this morning about this, and he said it very succinctly in a way that I'm going to remember forever, which is that he really likes founders that are externally evangelical, but internally skeptical. And so you're able to tell the story and sell the vision that you're looking to create, but internally, you know it's a mess. You know there's a lot to fix. You know you're a work in progress. You know that you need help. You know how to ask for it. You know how to get your people around you to actually get you to achieve that vision. And so those are the founders we love working with. I consider myself that type of founder as well, and really excited to have some founders in the room who I've backed. And the other additional lens we take on things is that we're investing in companies that are closing access gaps around health and wealth for overlooked communities. So largely we're doing digital health companies and fintech companies that are really targeting underserved needs. That means a lot of female founders, because a lot of needs that women face, back to what Caroline was saying about providing childcare in this country, is we're not looking at them. We're not spending time on them. And we are half of the population and deserve more. So I'm really excited to be focused on digital health in particular right now.
For me, every deal's different. So I'm a generalist. That means I invest in any and everything. The only thing we don't do is we don't do bio, but we'll do just about anything else, which includes, like, there's a restaurant in our portfolio, right? And so every single one of our deals is different, but they tend to focus around a founder's expertise, a founder's ability to execute, or a founder who's found a market that's so obvious that it's almost like when you think about it, you're like, why didn't a solution for this exist, right? Like those tend to be the type of founders I go to. So I'll give, I speak in stories, right? So I'll give two examples. One is, so there's a company, my North Star is a woman who's building a wig dryer, because there is no such thing as a wig dryer. And so she spent 3 years trying to pitch this to people and getting no's, so she eventually decided to become a surrogate mother to raise the money to build her prototype. Yes. Whoa. She gave birth to 2 kids.
That's hardcore.
So that she could get a nominal amount of money to start building her company. She's actually the reason why I started my firm. I literally quit my job and raised the funds so I could back her. Another one, so because of that founder, I put her story up on Twitter just to share my North Star story of, like, why this is important. And this guy in Tennessee who ran a design firm reached out to me and said, hey, I want to work with that founder. I go to his website and I look at the case studies, and there's a study of this device they build that made custom nail polish. I'm like, well, they've done beauty. This looks cool. Okay, I'll introduce my founder to him. He did good work with my founder. It's like, hey, can you introduce me to this company you have as one of your case studies? This seems really cool. He introduces me to this founder, this young guy in Memphis who's, like, obsessed with nail polish, who's telling me all these crazy things, but he's an engineer, so he's, like, super detailed oriented, and he's breaking down all these numbers, and, like, it just made too much sense. And then, like, my wife goes to get her nails done every 2 weeks, and half the time she can't find the color, or they ran out, or they don't make it anymore. I'm like, so with this, she never has this issue again? Oh yeah, this is perfect, this makes a bunch of sense. That was 3 years ago. I had no clue that his first real customer was going to be Walmart. He has a vending machine in 3 Walmarts in Tennessee. It'll be in 500 Walmarts by the end of this year, right? In the hotbed of Memphis, Tennessee, right?
Nice.
And, for me, it was just the unique angle there. So for me, like, every deal is different. And it's also like, I will tell you, like, yes, I can look at all the data, I can look at all the business stuff. I am not a data-driven investor. I use data to my advantage, but I also know as a pre-seed investor, I invest so early that within 3 years of my investment, your company's probably going to be fundamentally different. You're probably going to be doing something different. You had a pivot. A whole bunch has changed. So that company I did all those memos on ain't going to be that.
Yeah.
So I tend to focus on people and talent. And the way talent shows up very differently, right? It could be like I'm on a Zoom call and there'll be two founders and the male founder keeps speaking over the female founder on the team. That's a red flag. And then I'm going to ask about that in the meeting and watch it get really awkward. Right? Like those are the type of things you look for. And after, like Sydney, I've been in this industry almost a decade now. Like you start to pick up on those things. And that's how I teach the people who I work with, like, hey, we're going to go through the data, we're going to learn all the traditional stuff, but I also want you to understand and start to trust your own intuition in companies. And this is how you build that intuition over time. Pattern matching is looking for patterns of success, not patterns of what somebody looks like, right?
So you see the whole, wait, 1 second, follow up.
Yeah.
You see the whole pipeline of Twitter, right? Because everyone's coming at you. And you have to go through your spidey sense with these calls to figure out, okay, it's you. I vibe with you. How long does that take you?
I can figure it, I get that sense within the first 30-minute meeting.
Nice.
Yeah, at the end of the first 30-minute meeting, I kind of have a sense of it.
Yeah.
If I'm still thinking about it and like at the dinner table, I'm talking about you, and like 3 days later, my wife is like, will you shut up about this company? That's typically a good indication.
Okay, cool.
I echo what these two brilliant investors said, and I have to meet like all the typical VC high growth stuff. But kind of anchoring again in fortitude, and it's really the spidey sense of getting at who is going, because again, similar, Mac invests even earlier than I do, but knowing that whatever they're building, they're going to come up against the brick walls. They have to be somewhat delusional. Like the company's going to be different. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be moments when like they're going to run out of cash and they got to, beg, steal, borrow, and think super creatively. I know that all that's going to happen. They don't quite know it's going to happen. They're still like, because we're usually investing the first round, so the delusion is like real strong. Yeah. And so what I'm looking for is this person going to be able to persevere and adapt? And when I say adapt, it's all the things that Sydney said about like, how do you bring in the right people? But like, are they going to be able just to like not be crushed by the constant need to innovate themselves, their team, their product, everything, and kind of persevere? There's a few things that I actually ask specifically, which all of my fellows now know, probably annoyingly so. One, I'm it's like even in the 30-minute call, I'll be like, so tell me about a time when you failed. Like, and I mean failed. Like, I don't want to hear like I failed because I'm so communicative. Right? Like I want to know like when you didn't believe in yourself anymore when you were going after something. Walk me through that experience, which is like kind of intimidating to have to share.
You can pull that out of someone?
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%.
Yeah?
I mean, I think again, Charlotte mentioned this, like how you show up.
That's therapist talk.
Yeah, but like how you show up then attracts how other people show up. So I, in that 30-minute meeting, also share like, this is who I am, this is what I do, and like I'm real. So I think it attracts that. The other two questions I always ask is 5 years from now, knowing that they've usually been building for about 2-3 years. So 7 to 10 years in. So 5 years from now, how do you define success of your company? And then 5 years from now, how do you define success for you as a whole person in your life? And I'm really looking for how those answers align or do not align, and their thought process or not having their thought process with those two things.
Okay, really fast. I love that. One really random point that I was talking with a founder in the room about last night was when I was in 5th grade, I put together a PowerPoint presentation to my parents about what type of dog we should get and why we should get that dog. And
This explains so much about you now.
I know, but then the founder who I talked to did the same thing. And so I was like, there's these random things
I had to do a PowerPoint because I wanted to go to a 3-day festival.
Amazing.
As a senior in high school. My parents were like, you are not going to a 3-day music festival. And I was like, what if it's volunteer? And they're like, put together a PowerPoint of why that's going to be beneficial. I got to go.
You got to go. There's something about like young, like people who have, because what we were practicing, that's sales. Like we just did a sales strategy to our parents. And there's something about that is so embedded in one's character from a really young age. I still don't know what the right question is that I'm going to start asking founders to address it, but I do think it was just so surprising and also not at exactly the same time. Super interesting.
And, just for me to follow up, completely separate this and clarify, I didn't even finish going through everything that we look for as a firm. Like, it's core to our thesis.
There's more.
A major piece. Customer acquisition. Like, we really care about customer acquisition, so we look to see if you have either a repeatable or unique way to get your customers, because too many founders think so hard about their product and spend so much time on their product, they never learn how to get customers. And, like, this was my issue as a founder until I had a VC tell me, like, you're building a really cool hobby. I invest in companies. Go get customers. That was, like, the hardest thing in the world to hear. It was the realest thing. So I tell founders that all the time, and, like, founders get so mad, but it's like, when you sit back and you think about it, it's like, well, there's something to that.
Yeah. Actually, it's great that you guys are founder-based investors, meaning like you were once, you've done it, you've got the rug burns and stuff. And because, they say that in a founder's year, there's at least once, if not once a month, once a year at least, where there's a death-defying moment, like your company is going to die. Silicon Valley Bank goes under and your accounts are frozen, right? And traditional VCs freak out. So these people are on your board and they freak out. and you see what happened. And it's great that you're looking for perseverance, you're looking for character, and that you're aligned, because it's in those moments you have to be relaxed and like clear mind to like go through all of that. So I think what you see up here is quite unique. This is not regular VCs. They freak out all the time because they've not done it before.
We still freak out. The portfolio's the portfolio. But
We totally freak out.
I will say this.
Just quietly.
On the inside.
I will say this, though, for my founders when they get to those situations. One of the things I do regularly, typically on a Friday afternoon, I'll text one of my founders, tell them how much I appreciate them, how hard they work, and then I'll send them $100. I'll
Nice.
Cash App them or Venmo them, and I call it a founder care package. I'll be like, go take yourself, get a massage, go on a date, go to the movies, do something, get out of here, but this is something for you.
That's so
I
nice.
also do those care packages once a founder's coming out of a situation like that, because they've been dealing with so much stress, the board's getting on their nerves, they feel like nobody's listening to them. If they're a woman, oh my God, there's so many other things on top of that. And so when you're done, it's like you want to take a breath, but you still got to run the company. And so those are typically the moments when I try to step in and do something nice.
I think your Twitter's going to blow up now. I'm sorry, X.
So I have a founder in the room who can vouch for
This should
this.
be your tagline. Like, you're gonna. Why do founders like Mac? He gives me $100 every once in a while.
So easy, $100. Well, so we've been looking at this whole landscape of VC for last 50 years, whatever. The amount of money that's been going to women and minority funds have increased over all this time, which is great. Well, because COVID's not helping, but the amount of money into VC has been increasing, but the amount percentage-wise to minority and women groups has not changed, and as you've seen, has gone down. What do you think could be done to change all of that? We need more of this, because there's this perspective here from people on the stage and those with a different perspective and insight into different types of founders that aren't just a white engineer from San Francisco. So what do you say to that?
I think some other people alluded to it today in terms of like starting to have the conversations outside of rooms like this. We all know the stats, we all know the information, and so I think there's very tactical things like going to speak at different places, going to talk to the LPs. There's some really big structural things in place that are going to take time. I mean, I think all of us just showing up each day, like we are part of the change. We're not going to be the ones who drive, a 2% to a 56%. We'll help drive it instrumentally in some ways, but I think starting to engage conversations, and what I'm betting on is that it takes time, but like results will eventually speak in the sense of if I get to say, yeah, I 3x plus my fund, that someone's going to pay attention to that. I set off too with like the thesis we invest in women, and what I've already seen kind of true to my thesis is that at a certain point, it's not, held fast, but at a certain point, numbers speak, right? Like at a late Series A, Series B, if a company is, 5xing revenue, has a path to profitability, and is super cost efficient. Now, back in the little hype cycle where everybody was just, raising off stories, not as much. But right now, people pay attention to that. So whereas I feel like, people have maybe started in like paying attention to invest in women and minorities in the past 5 years, I think the companies that will come through the lack of capital, like I don't want to speak for my founders, but like my founders like not having access to capital because capital's tight right now, that's not like a new thing that they're like, oh my God, how do I deal with this, right? Like, or hey, you have to figure out how you're going to get to break even. That's not like a new exercise for them. So the bet is that I'm making, even though it's not going to raise all the percentage points, is like in 5, 10 years, which it takes that time to see the companies rise to the top, these companies are just stronger, perform better, and will have stronger results. And I think what we're seeing is even the big firms, even though they're super bloated still, are now, they care about it, right? Like they're having to look at their Series Bs and be like, we're going to probably have to do markdowns. We kind of got to push it off for 2 years, but we might have to do markdowns soon. So we actually care about the economics of a company rather than the narrative.
I think, agreed. There is something about this new cycle that gives me a lot of excitement because I think companies are starting from a much more grounded state of reality of what they want to create and what they can create. It's exciting. I think it's realistic. I think realism is really fun. Maybe that's just me. And so I have really enjoyed my conversations with founders now, I think more than the last 5-7 years when it just felt like, people were getting funding to do truly nothing.
And not only that, but like then your other VC investors like, how come you're not going? You're like, what are you funding right now? Why is this 20 million posts? The multiple never. This does not math.
It does not. The math was not mathing. It did not make any sense. I think and I said this in our call too. I think that as a Black woman in venture capital, there's only so many things that one I can control, and two that I have time and energy to care about. And one of the things that I don't have time and energy to care about is truly what Andreessen Horowitz is doing. I just don't care. That's why I launched my own fund, so that I could have a lot more ownership over what I'm doing and a lot more control over the impact that I'm having and the people who I'm hiring and the type of, like, just how we show up. And that is I'm just so privileged and humbled by that. I just don't care what a lot of these other folks are doing. It's not my business.
Well, I also think there's an element of like, and Mac, you can speak to this more, that by having different folks come in and start these firms, we're not necessarily competing with the big firms, but what we're doing is that we're also bringing kind of a groundedness to like the basic principles of investing, or we're also doing things that are innovative or a different way to approach things. I believe, I guess my hope is that some of the larger firms that are even more resourced will look at some of this and be like, all right, well, I'll copy that. Like, I'll take some of that. That's a good idea. And that's great. I want them. Like, I even posted when I was like, hey, these are the benefits we're offering. I was like, I called out the big firms. I was like, there's no reason that you guys couldn't do this too. Like, go for it. Copy me. Like, do it. And then, Mac, when we did the 3VC thing with Gail, we cared not just about investing in diverse entrepreneurs, but like, how do we get more people investing in this asset class that are first-time investors? So I partnered up with Mac and another VC who runs Vitalize VC, Gail, and we put together a pretty innovative structure. I think it was a little fund-to-funds type thing where we got people in who like only had to commit $10,000 per year, and they could be an LP in all 3 of our funds. I don't think anybody had done that in VC at all. but like it just made sense. And now I have 6 other people who I've had calls with that are like structuring the same thing to combine efforts. And it's one of those things, it takes time, but like that's an example where these small things end up hopefully having a snowball effect
That's great.
of change.
So let me speak to this question very directly and not mince any words. The way you get more people like us in venture is you need more people like us in the seats that fund venture, in the LP seats. My fund will never be $1 billion fund because I don't think institutional LPs want to deal with me. And that's okay. I am fine having a $50 to $100 million fund and just keep doing that and do what I do. That is okay with me because I'm not optimistic enough to think in the next 10, 20 years that this is going to change, right? So until we get more people that look like us in the seat of LPs, then you get more people who look like us investing, and then you get more people who look like us getting funded, right? All the data shows that. But institutional LPs aren't going to care until people who look like us start companies that have billion-dollar outcomes. It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how fast you're growing. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is the size of exits by companies that were started by people that look like you. Not that had a CEO or was ran by somebody that looked like you, but started. Because that's the data point that they're always going to go back to. It's like, hey, we don't have sufficient data that shows that you can get unicorn exits from this group of entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter how fast they're growing. It doesn't matter how many of them are doing it. It doesn't matter how they're outperforming. No, the only outperformance we care about is the end goal, the money. And you know how I know that to be fundamentally true? Because after George Floyd, you heard a bunch of venture funds and a bunch of companies how they wanted to invest in diverse founders and very specifically black founders. You know who you didn't hear anything from? Institutional LPs. No railroad fund or pension fund said anything. And they're the top of the food chain. And they didn't say anything because they don't have to. Because their business works just fine whether we're part of it or not. They let the moment show that. And so no, I'm not optimistic. All I'm going to do is keep funding amazing companies and trying to put points on the board. Because once you put points on the board, then you go to them and be like, I made a bunch of people a lot of money. Do you want to make money with me? And the only number that I care about is DPI. None of this IR, none of that stuff. How much cash on cash did you make on your fund? And what were the companies that returned that fund? If those companies look like you, more money will come that way. If not, the game is what it is.
Love
it
your
takes
energy.
time. We got like 15, 20 years.
Yeah. Love your energy. Love this. Real talk. To close out, and then I want to give some time to the audience to ask some questions. What do you see out in the ecosystem among companies and just deals and everything? What's exciting you right now? What's hot? What's getting you talking about it all day, every day? There's a pause.
So look, I'll tell you what's exciting me. So there's 2 companies I'm looking at. Like I have 46 companies in my portfolio for Fund 1. There are 2 companies I'm currently looking at that go into Fund 2. One's a company that makes pads and tampons for tweens, ages 8 to 15, because they don't make pad size for those young ladies. That's ridiculous. Like that's another one, like, why isn't that a thing? That's a no-brainer, like, yes, we need to fund this. The other one is a company that makes a zipper that goes all the way around so that women don't have to take all their clothes off to go to the bathroom.
Sold.
Like, this is like the simplest innovation ever. You were able to patent this? Like, you could patent a zipper?
That's so
and this
funny.
doesn't exist? Yeah, like those kind of things get me excited, right? Because, like,
That group, who's got a form or a swipe card?
so, like, for me, yeah.
You know, I'm a generalist. I mean, B2B SaaS, enterprise, B2B2C. I have certain pillars we invest in. I get excited about, like, when I see dollar sign. I just get excited about a deal. I get excited about money. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that, because obviously that
She
that
loves
sounds
money.
pretty obvious. I love money. Love fucking money. So for example, I came across this company, we're in diligence with them, but they provide an end-to-end software that services the medical transportation industry. And you're like, medical, what? All the people who can't just take a Lyft or an Uber or a taxi because they are in a wheelchair, they have other things. That is all reimbursed by insurance, by the way. Billion-dollar industry. There is zero software servicing. It is Outlook, text message, phone calls, no routing. When I see something like that, I'm like, lots of money, lots of players that care about that money, and no basic tech. Yes. So I get genuinely excited when I see kind of those fundamental gaps where like there's a ton of money flowing in here. It's not necessarily like crazy novel to bring tech. It just hasn't, probably is very similar to what you look at. Like nobody's just been servicing this industry. Nobody's been caring about it. And there's a lot of money to be made. So I get really excited about those areas.
Monies.
I mean, you know, Catherine spoke today. Like when I first saw it, I was like, collectibles? Like, what the fuck? And then I looked at it and I was like, wow, there's a lot of money that goes through here. There's no software, like nobody's managing inventory for, like this is crazy. And I was like, well, lots of money, no software. There's other things you have to think about, but I'm like, yeah, interesting.
Huh. Are there enough pockets of those like left over after everyone's
Oh,
gobbled
yes,
it up?
it's awesome, yes. I hunt for those, yes.
All right.
I really like, so the reason why I'm focusing on digital health and fintech is it's been a lifelong obsession of mine. I went to Duke undergrad, studied with Dr. Sandy Darity, who's one of the forefront researchers on wealth inequality in the United States, and came to New York City to work in the Bloomberg administration, and did a lot of work around how are we closing access gaps for communities of color, largely the ones who are not in the Upper East Side or Upper West Side, but in Flatbush and Queens, and saw that there's just so much work to be done to invest more heavily in those communities. The other part of it is my dad was the first Black chief of staff of Mercy Hospital in San Diego, and so I grew up in and around healthcare. I saw a lot of Black and brown people on these dialysis rounds that I did with my dad as a very young kid, and was so confused. This does not make any sense, because it doesn't. And so much of what gets me excited are companies that very clearly are closing a gap that is just so silly to exist in the first place. A company that we just invested in is a company that is closing access gaps around helping doctors actually serve Medicaid populations. So it's actually really hard when you're a doctor to serve this population, because it's like, it's complicated, there's not a lot of tech, it's just unnecessarily a mess. And this company shared, it's like, okay, but actually when you're servicing the Medicaid population, it's basically a single payer, because the only payer is the government. And so it actually should be the most simple healthcare providing opportunity. And there's just like light bulb moments. Whenever I get those light bulb moments and I'm like, you're right, this actually does have a really simple solution, but nobody thought of it because nobody cared enough to think about it. Those are my favorite founders, those are my favorite companies, and that's the whole purpose of this fund.
So no AI. Oh, okay.
Nice, nice,
Oh, sorry, what'd you say?
I said no AI. That was the one thing like none of us said. Just,
nice, nice. Because that's what's required in the pitch these days. It's really weird.
hey, it's kind of
All
like
right,
needed.
so the room just filled up. Let's see. Any questions? All right, shot it real fast. Go.
One, love the necktie jacket.
Oh, thanks.
And two, I am so inspired. I've had the pleasure of working, I've been trying to figure out a name for this that's not trenches this whole entire time, because I've been in those places with the three of you. And I think what impresses me the most about these two people is in VC, your reputation matters so much. And so many people will work on this like fake reputation when y'all just like don't talk about it, you be about it. And I think Mac, for someone like you who has built a fund on Twitter, there's a lot of like haterade on that. However, it was just like the most authentic to you, and I think that's what people have tried to replicate but can't really do it. Caroline, we've been there.
Yeah, we've been in the trenches.
And what
Yeah.
has, and when we talk about study, what has impressed me most about you is like in those tough, super nuanced moments that we don't have enough time to talk about, the steadiness of your approach and like it's not that serious, it's not that big of a deal, is so important to founders. And Cindy, I just like, we have so many things that we still have to do together. But I guess what I'm trying to get at, I don't really have a question, I just
Wow.
I
Man.
mean, I love her.
Like waiting.
Thank you. Thank you. I did not plant her, by the way, so.
I just want to reiterate that there's so much more depth to what we get to see with these folks on stage. And it's in those tough, small decision moments that the brilliance comes out. And the same with all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very kind.
Her mama is in the
All right, anyone else? Anyone else? All right, done. Go. Sold.
I'm Joyce. Thank you so much. It's such a refreshing conversation, and also to hear AI is not your thesis. I'm building a fintech, and I'm curious because this comes across often. How can we demonstrate impact without sounding like a charity startup?
So I'll be the man to do some mansplaining and say something controversial. If you are doing a startup that has impact, that's amazing. Most VCs don't care, and even some of the impact VCs, like they care, but at the end of the day, our goal is to return capital. So I would tell you, have it as part of your story, but when you get to the numbers, focus on the numbers, right? Don't make your pitch all about the story and all about the impact and how, like, that's great. I'm in the business of making money, so how are we making a lot of money together? Like, that sounds crass, but that's just the reality of it. And when you get in front of a lot of the cooker-cutter VCs with the vest on, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say anything, but when you get in front of those guys, like, they're not going to care about that story unless it resonates with them on a very personal level. So the times where telling that impact story works is if you've done some research on that investor and, like, that story directly resonates with that individual. Then it makes sense, right? Because now you can tap into something on a human level. But outside of that, they care about the money.
I think it's investor by investor. And I think that's...
Sydney's one of the good ones. That's why she says that.
I also think that's like, there's a very... and I don't know another way to put this, but like masculine energy around like, it can only be this or that. That's never true. It's always both and. And so how are you thinking about, and I just heard this phrase a few weeks ago, like every single investment is an impact investment because you make an impact with that investment. It can be positive, negative, neutral, but you have done something. And so to acknowledge that, I think is actually important. So I care about the impact that you're making. Yes, we can
Sydney's
talk.
one of the good ones.
But I also think like this is one of the things about the industry more broadly where it's just like, that doesn't make any sense. Like it just doesn't make any sense. So I'm hoping that it catches on more broadly.
I have
One
nothing
last
to
question before we close out. Was that back there? All right, go ahead. All right, for reals now though. Question, one last question. I don't want comments, I don't want feedback. All right, what you got back there? Stand up, stand up.
Cindy, I love the evangelical on the outside, the spiritual on the inside. How do you raise the stage to reconcile that?
It's a lifelong process because exactly, you're always in that tension. You're always in that tension. The way that I do it, like personally, is I have friends who don't care about what I do. They don't care if I'm successful. They don't care if I'm not. They truly, I just saw one of them the last week, and I was like, I got to meet Madam Vice President Kamala Harris last week, and I was on freaking
Nice.
cloud 9 about it, and she was just like, cool, so like, when are we having lunch? Like, they just don't care. And I think that gives me a sense of groundedness so that I can operate in that tension, because that tension is very anxiety provoking. And so you are constantly a little on edge, but I haven't figured out a way, another way to move through it.
I'll share. So my personal experience with that tension is the evangelical part, I have two goals in life, and people have heard me say this over and over. I want to raise two incredible human beings, and I want to get more money in the hands of women. That's it. That's like hyper laser focused on that. The evangelical part of the work that I do is how do I get more money in the hands of women? By having that, it's a simple statement, but yet it's really how I end up framing a lot of my decisions around, and also how I measure my success. Now, the success of my fund is how do I return capital multiple times over on my fund. That's very technically the success. But by framing it up against my overall North Star goal of how do I get more money in the hands of women, that opens up the opportunity for that internal struggle of what is true success, because I can adjust and understand how I define success related to that overall goal. And it might mean that I could fail in life, right? Like fail by my own standards if I don't return capital. I don't think that's going to be true. I already have returned some capital, but I can also judge like how have what I done gotten more money in the hands of women, and I think there's many avenues to go that way. So I think that always anchoring into like your ultimate goal that you're going after, and it might look at hey, you might have a startup, and you're going after that ultimate goal, and the startup doesn't work. Like you have to shut it down and return capital. But ultimately knowing what you're trying to achieve in life and recognizing there might be different pathways and ways in which you get there, I think is how you manage through that constant kind of push and pull.
All right. Well, on that note, I'd like to wrap and thank Caroline, Sydney, Mac. Thank you all for being so original.